purpose-driven strategies, harnessing your vision, specifically thinking about exponential growth, very different than simply doubling your business. There's a very different mindset that's required when you actually think about harnessing your vision, where you want to go, and the process of thinking in an exponential way, not simply in a 2x kind of way. This expert panel, we're going to explore this whole concept of clarity of purpose, vision. How does that then serve as the guiding star for your team, for your community? How does it start to accelerate your growth through that inspiration that's created? I'm really excited to be handing the mic and the lead for moderating this over to Carolyn Berlin. She's a principal at TalkTalk. She has a wonderful background, over 25 years in this field, creating bespoke leadership programs, drawing inspiration from luminaries like Da Vinci and Aristotle. We can always learn from the past, Carolyn. Such a wonderful.
Sure can.
Carolyn will be as engaging here as I'm sure she is in all of her workshops in personalizing, fostering trust, psychological safety, thinking about that as a way to harness the wonderful things that are inside of our brains and our souls in order to drive community building, in order to scale.
Oh, looks like he's frozen. Do you see that too, Heather and Desiree?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, here it comes.
Okay. Sorry, Pete, you kind of cut out the very last sentence, so perhaps that last sentence repeated would be great.
Sorry, I might have froze a little bit there as well. I'm not sure if that happened to everybody, but I said, without further ado, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here this morning. So good morning to everyone. I'm also equally thrilled to be joined by Heather and Desiree. I've had the opportunity to get to know Heather a little bit and Desiree in the last week. Their breadth and depth of experience is immense. And so I know that all of us are going to learn more than a thing or two over the next hour. And again, Pete did steal my thunder. I did want to extend my congratulations on behalf of Calgary on being awarded the Person of the Year. So today we are going to be talking about purpose-driven scaling, as Pete said, harnessing our vision for exponential growth. During our time together, we're going to really be, hopefully, if we've done our job well, covering 4 key topics, which is the role of vision and purpose in business growth. Second is inspiring and aligning teams around a common vision. Third is engaging customers and stakeholders with your vision. And fourth is overcoming challenges and purpose-driven scaling. We do have a Q&A feature, so I encourage you to ask questions. We're going to reserve those until the end. So where I would like to start, with your permission, Heather and Desiree, is really talking broadly about this topic of purpose-driven scaling. And I think it begs the question, like, how do you grow not just rapidly, but also meaningfully? How do companies scale in ways to achieve exponential growth, but do so with a clear, purposeful vision that aligns with core values and broader impact on society? So I'll tell you my background in working with leaders. About half of the leaders that I encounter in my business, so that could be from CEOs to managers to supervisors, they believe in connecting vision with purpose. And I would say the other half, and don't quote me on percentages here, but that's my guess thematically. They think of it as a make work project. So something to frame and throw on a wall, right? And the truth is, a clear, compelling purpose drives long-term success. So leaders that I can show that have a purpose-driven scaling strategy, or more, where I can show them that it's more than a buzzword. It's about staying true to the core vision and igniting to that, to the company's core inception. So to steal a little bit from Simon Sinek, I know Desiree and I were talking about that the other day. This approach really is about emphasizing the why behind your business, and it can be just as important, if not more important, than connecting to the how. So maybe, Desiree, I'll start with you and just kind of get your broad perspective on this topic of purpose-driven scaling.
Yeah, well, thank you, Carolyn. And it's great to be here with both you and Heather this morning, talking about purpose-driven leadership, my favorite topic. And I think if you just go back to business itself, right? And I totally get where you're coming from with, some people think of it more as fluff. Some people think about it as, just doing the sort of purpose washing and, making sure that, in order to attract talent and that sort of thing, that they've got this, purpose statement within their organization. But it's really about strategic focus. So a clear purpose helps, define a company's direction and their priorities. It also helps to guide decision-making, right? So, your resource allocation, what types of efforts are you going to make to align with long-term objectives? So when your team wants to know about where the company is going, right, beyond startup, they need to have that sort of vision and purpose set up for them so that they feel part of something bigger and meaningful and that they're doing something that they're very passionate about. That's how you get the buy-in. So, when your team understands and believes in the company's purpose, they're more likely then to be motivated, they're more likely to be engaged, which in turn really leads to higher productivity, creativity, retention, and these are all crucial aspects of a company's growth trajectory.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Desiree. I mean, it's that meaningful connection that you talk about that I think is critical to this topic. Heather, what about you? What's your broad thoughts on the topic of purpose-driven scaling?
Well, I can tell you that as long as I have been in the workforce, which, has been quite a while, without a clear vision and purpose, this is, you don't have a roadmap for where you want to actually go. And so it creates amazing and incredible alignment. If you can be really clear about what your purpose is, if you can be very clear about what your objectives are, it can be motivating. It can be just great team building. It can be just basically just creates a platform for the team to basically collaborate and work together, and very clearly communicates what you're ultimately, what does success look like. So without a clear vision and purpose, it's very difficult to navigate that. So there hasn't been a single organization I've ever worked at where that is not the case. And if it wasn't the case, then we would make sure, and sometimes we've had to reset. I mean, that's been an interesting journey. So you have to recognize too when that isn't working or when you're not clear enough, and readjust so that you can, engage the people and engage, the direction and make sure that everyone is aligned. So that's kind of the basic premise of doing that. And I think no matter whether it's a for-profit, a nonprofit, even a platform for something where you're trying to raise awareness, without that clear vision and purpose, you're not going to get anybody's attention. People will just go, well, you don't know what you're doing. And, you actually don't understand your value proposition. So that's kind of those are my thoughts. Thank you.
No, can I just go back to something that you said, Heather, that I think is quite important for our listeners, which is it's okay to kind of course correct if that vision or that purpose is in alignment, or it's okay to kind of go back and redo or readjust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it happens quite often because as an organization grows, the way you used to do it doesn't work perhaps going forward. And so being open to, changing course as you go is really important, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think the other thing you said, and we're going to go into the first topic in just a second, is about profit or not for profit. I think oftentimes people and leaders think that there's two different paths around purpose and vision. And you're suggesting that they both require a clear roadmap, to use your language.
Yes. Mhm.
Love it. Okay, and I think we've kind of already started in that first question, which is how does defining a clear purpose impact a company's growth trajectory? So anything more around that, Desiree, than what we've already covered around roadmaps and North Stars and all of that?
Yeah, no, I think I want to just add to Heather's comment because I just want to get some clarity around her point about a change in going back and a redo. And I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, but I think what you're saying is going back, if the path you're taking is not working,
Mhm.
then there's no problem going back and making a change, restructuring how that journey is going or the tactics or the strategies you're using to get there. But I think once you have your vision and your purpose, I mean, that's something that normally would not change in an organization, right?
That is correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that is
so
correct.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
point of clarification I wanted to make
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it's going back and going, okay, no, I want a new vision or I want a new purpose. Now that's
Yeah.
when your team goes, hey, you don't know what you're doing.
Right. I guess it's more about refining, right, as you go, because, like the whole point of having a clear vision and purpose so you can create that alignment. And if things aren't kind of aligned because something else is kind of, there's been something else that's come up that you didn't actually anticipate, then you have to adjust, I guess, not your vision and purpose necessarily, but the platform in order for people to align. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So further on the role of vision and purpose, do we want to kind of go down that
So
discussion?
like how does defining a clear purpose impact a company's growth trajectory? Does it?
Yeah. Well, it really defines the success for your venture. So what is your value proposition ultimately? And what is your ultimate objective? How do you differentiate yourself to make your company, to make it memorable and to make it something that people are going to go, oh, remember when we were talking last week? Remember that person said something about that organization? That was interesting. So the organizations that I've been involved with, typically we have a very audacious, I guess, objectives in order for us to kind of shoot for the stars. Because I think ultimately, if you set the bar low, then that's a starting point that perhaps is easily achievable. So, for example, an objective that was inconceivable 5 years ago, but now it's just close enough. It draws attention. So, for example, when we started Board Ready Women, we wanted to change the amount of gender representation on boards. So we wanted to increase the number of women, and we wanted to start with Alberta. And so our clear vision and purpose was that we wanted to go from 15% or 13% in 2019 of women on Alberta boards to 30% within 8 years. And people going like, that's crazy. Like that's very difficult. So, but as of today, we've enabled and created awareness of the value for board gender diversity and the wealth of talent, the women we have here in Alberta. And that number has risen to 25%. Now, if that isn't an attention grabber in 5 years, I don't know what is. But we were able to move that needle by 12%. So this was clearly because the purpose had created excitement about what the possibilities were and awareness, interest from women and corporations that clearly benefited, and not just our members, but it also benefited the boards and the organizations that they serve. So it also has garnered national attention. So that's another way to differentiate yourself. So when you start to get the ball rolling, then you can create a much larger platform for collaboration. And so we've done that with other organizations across the country. And, we've extended our reach now to Edmonton, Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto. And so just to go back to our discussion from the last question, we have now examined our purpose and said, how are we going to just not focus on Alberta, but how do we take this nationally, right? And so this was kind of a bit of an adjustment, I guess, in our vision and our journey. So So we define success at 30% in Alberta, and we also communicate our value proposition by sharing facts relative to achieving better productivity in decision-making by having diverse perspectives on a board. And we differentiated ourselves by being the first such organization to do so. The impact, as I said, has moved the needle by 12%. And I would like to take full credit for that. I know that what it's done is basically there's been a lot of organizations that have come to that awareness, through their proxy advisors sometimes, or, by other people on their board saying we need more gender representation. But for a nonprofit, for example, and you really want to grow and be relevant, having the ability to clearly define what that looks like, do the collaboration that is necessary, make sure that you're communicating with everyone as to how you're progressing on those objectives, then creates a platform for future opportunity. So I just wanted to use that as an example of some of the things that we're doing in order to make sure that we're aligning and that we're clear in our purpose and our vision.
Well, congratulations. That's amazing growth, Heather, with Board Ready Women. So that's a great example. Using value proposition as well. Desiree, your thoughts?
Well, I think what's important is communication, right? And, communicate. If you're not talking about it, then they don't know, and you cannot just say it once. You have to talk about your vision and purpose in everything that you do, in every team meeting, in every aspect of conversation with your stakeholders, all your multi-stakeholders, whether it's partners, vendors, or clients. So, it sort of has to become part of the team's DNA for it to move forward. So, I love Heather's example of growth because I think that's why we all get into business in the first place, right? First of all, it's a business, and depending on what you're doing, if it's for profit, obviously you want to make a profit, you want to grow, you want to be able to do things with that. And as Heather mentioned, if it's not for profit, you have a different vision or purpose. You're trying to grow the number of females on boards, you're trying to create gender equity or equality somewhere else, or you're trying to change the world in some way. But what most businesses fear is when you have focus on a social purpose or something else, it takes your eye off the ball of your main business. And that's where they fear that their growth or trajectory is not going to happen. And I'm talking about from a for-profit aspect, as Heather was talking from a not-for-profit access. I would say that my organization that I scaled up through purpose, we were never as profitable as we were once we utilized the purpose concept and started driving with a specific purpose and vision towards, educating females in underserved communities and developing countries. Once we had that social purpose, everything else in our business skyrocketed, including profitability, growth, trajectory, and all of those amazing KPIs and metrics, including customer service index went up, our customer NPS scores, everything. So, it really, the combination is incredible once it gets going.
Yeah, and I think what we should highlight here, Desiree, of what you said is communicate. It's not a one and done. It's not a bomb in event, bomb out. Oh, isn't that a lovely plaque like how I started? There's real direct KPI linkages to spending time consistently and regularly for leaders on their purpose and their vision. And so I think for those that are listening and watching this, that needs to be an underscore theme of what you both just said, to revisit and look at purpose and vision and keep that at the root. And I actually think it also probably becomes a metric around, you talked about KPIs, Desiree, around attraction into an organization, retention in the organization, what you said earlier too, Desiree, around meaning. I understand what this company is all about. And it's not just about making a bunch of money. There's something more. There's something more around that. So if we transitioned into the second topic around teams, and what strategies would you recommend for leaders to inspire and align their teams around a shared vision? And I think a part two to that, if I could, because I'm absolutely obsessed with the topic of psychological safety these days. And I think you and I talked about this, Heather and Desiree, last time we came together, and I kind of define it as an environment of rewarded vulnerability. So does psychological safety come into the strategy of how you inspire and align teams around a shared vision? And so I'll open it up to you, Heather, first to get your reaction to that question.
Well, let's start first with, kind of some of the strategies, and then we can maybe hit the psychologically safety. But this is something I think Desiree really has some fantastic expertise in. So I might turn that part over to her as well. But I think, honestly, we just go back to the very first strategy, which is how do you inspire and align your teams? Well, you communicate. You clearly communicate the vision, educate teams on the importance and the benefits of a common vision. Too many leaders just assume it's a given. But if you can create a platform for teams to participate in ideas and ways to achieve that vision, get their buy-in, their excitement, and certainly, collaborate on their thoughts, that is a good starting point. Secondly, keeping people in the loop. So going back again to this communicate, it's going to keep people interested in the progress and engaged in the outcomes, right? And so that's super important. Last but not least is celebrate success. I love celebrating success. It's one thing that we don't do very, very often. I mean, we tend to focus on the negative because we do course corrections, which is just a normal part of any organization. But you have to recognize people's contributions, and having those KPIs that you spoke about earlier are extremely important, because if you don't measure it, then you don't actually know that progress is happening towards your goal. So I just think by implementing those strategies, leaders can effectively align their teams around a shared vision, creating motivation and maintaining a focus on achieving those goals. So as far as psychological safety, again, not, no shame or blame. It is all about, we are a team. How do we together function as a team? And how do you lift everyone up at the same time as making sure your high performers are, putting their shoulder into it so that they can demonstrate what it looks like when a great team leads. So yeah, no, that's kind of, I'll leave the rest of the psychological piece up to Desiree, because I know she's got some great ideas.
Well,
Desiree is amazing. Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight something that you just said there, Heather, around celebrating success. Back in the day, I spent some time in the employee engagement survey space. So analyzing what do these numbers mean? And there was one question in the survey that looked at recognition and celebration. And there is a direct linkage to employee engagement and how often we actually say, hey, well done here, and taking a minute to do that. In terms of the second part around the functions as a team and psychological safety, I think one thing to highlight too is I don't know where conflict became a dirty word. So what I mean by that is, in the teams that I work with, if we've developed a psychologically safe, trusting environment, we're afforded the luxury actually of going into conflict. And conflict just means that we are producing a better widget, right? Whatever that widget is we're challenging each other to do that. And so setting an environment of psychological safety becomes paramount on this topic and just leadership in general. So Desiree, I'm curious, what strategies would you recommend for leaders to inspire and align around a shared vision?
Yeah, well, everything that Heather said is bang on. So, I don't want to repeat what she said, but I'll maybe add a couple of other things. We felt that having a very diverse and inclusive culture and ecosystem was going to really help our business thrive and for everybody to get on board. We created a very unique hiring and recruitment process, which I chatted with you guys about, which is we have a no resume, no interview process. So we utilize a profiling software platform in order to align a individual's behaviors and values, core values with our cultural behaviors and core values, and bring them in. If they score a certain score on that, of course, there's other, skill testing that goes along with that. But this way, we don't have an indication as to their gender, sexual orientation, any of those things. And we don't have the bias that we have when we're doing face-to-face interviews. And so really it created an unbelievable, diverse, team that felt very comfortable with each other because they were all different in every aspect and manner. And it created a really great culture around this purpose and vision we have. So I would add that when you're onboarding, it's really important that that culture piece around your purpose and vision is part of every onboarding that you do. And that will also attract like-minded employees, investors, business partners who share similar values, visions, and it creates a really strong, cohesive organizational culture and network is having that diversity and then everybody talking about that shared vision. I'll just touch a bit on the psychological piece. Healthy conflict, like you said, Carolyn, so important to have. Nobody should be afraid to say what they need to say. Everybody should feel like they're being listened to and heard. So I see at the intersection of purpose and the type of work environment you have is something called culture. So people can only feel safe in a culture where they can contribute and be their true selves without any backlash, as Heather mentioned. And this means a feeling of belonging, trust, and support that needs to be created. And all these things are intertwined. You cannot really have a purpose-driven company without the supporting values and behaviors that create that safe space. So that is work. And I've always said it takes, anywhere between 5 and 7 years to create that culture, and it can take between 5 and 7 days to destroy it. That's why you have to be consistently doing it every single day. You have to live it.
Yeah, one of the things I like to say is fish have water, people have culture, right? It's in and around us all the time. And I love the stats that you've just laid down. I just want to go back to something that you said around hiring and recruitment, because I'm in organizations all day, every day. And what you're doing around removing bias is so impressive, Desiree. I'm curious how you decided to do that, because frankly, not a lot of companies are.
Yeah, well, first of all, the type of business I have requires a lot of frontline team, and just the process, the recruitment process, the hiring process, the interview was taking hours and thousands of hours, and, really was starting to be costly. And again, those biases you could see by the type of people that were entering the business, a lot of similarities between certain, people. And we weren't getting the type of, culture that we needed through that. So it was sort of out of frustration, but sort of also brainstorming. How can we get varied cultures and backgrounds in here so that we could be a creative team and an inclusive team without, having to one by one, be very selective, right? This way it's a natural selection, right? And so it was more out of, let's try to, streamline the process, but also how do we get a varied, very different looking workforce?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And creating, bringing people in through the onboarding process that understand the purpose, removing bias, having a diverse team. Wonderful, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'd like to go now, so we've kind of, if we look at it as a inverted funnel, we've taken it pretty broad, looking at it broadly. purpose-driven scaling, and then looking at our teams, I kind of want us to look outward. So how can companies effectively communicate their purpose to customers and shareholders? So who'd like to start off on that one?
Yeah, if you don't mind, this is one thing that, is quite simple, honestly, but people don't know how to do it. And what I want to talk about here is, how do you demonstrate success and provide examples of success to your customers so that they trust what you're doing, or they buy into what you're doing. And it's called creating a business case. And I'm not kidding. This can be done for any business on any particular product or any particular thing that you're doing in your organization. It's essential for demonstrating your value proposition, because it provides a structured and compelling argument for why a particular initiative should be pursued. It can help quantify costs and benefits. It can outline resource optimization. It considers risk management, strategic alignment, competitive advantage, and return on investment. So, for example, for nonprofits, you can do it. I remember when I was board chair at United Way, and we were starting a brand new program called All In for Youth, and it was a risky venture. And so, one of the things that you don't want to do on a nonprofit is you have to be, very aware of risk that you're taking. Even in a for-profit, you have to be aware of that. But in a nonprofit, particularly, because you want to make sure that you're stewarding those dollars. So we came up with a business case for All In for Youth, because we were speaking to business people about taking a risk on something that could create profound change. That is how we reached, and we managed to get about $10 million in funding for that project alone, because people went, if you're willing to kind of put it out there, what are some of the quantifiable benefits? What are the soft benefits? What do the benefits look like in the future? Then, we can get behind this. So, for example, Board Ready Women membership costs $300 a year. Now, through the connections and the collaborations that we create and the opportunities we create for people to meet other people and to connect with board opportunities, the return on investment in that is 300 to 1. So in other words, if they, through the connections that they've created, and they end up with a board opportunity, that's about $90,000 a year, right? So that's a 1 year return, 300 to 1. So, but sometimes it takes longer to find a board. But the bottom line is, how do you convey your value proposition? Show specific, here's kind of what, here's the costs, here's the benefits, here's the as much as you possibly can, here are the quantifiable ROI. So it's not that hard. If I can do it on nonprofits, anyone can do it. Anyway, that was my one.
I don't know about that, Heather. I think you're quite skilled. I'm curious, as a follow-up to that, is storytelling at all a part of like an elevator speech or that kind of thing? Does that come into play in terms of crafting part of your strategy?
Yeah, I mean, that's married to the business case, because you share examples of that success. Yeah. You can say, here's one example. So we installed this software in your field sites and basically saved you 5 operators actually having to be on site, saved 2 trips to, we helped with safety because you no longer require trucks to go there to the site, et cetera. So, but you can actually share a story and say, this is what happened with one of my clients, and this is why this is beneficial. So that's actually what leads to real success, because people can then hear the specific examples. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Heather. What about you, Desiree, around communicating purpose to customer and stakeholders, and maybe even perhaps the importance of storytelling in that?
Sure. Yeah. Just like Heather, we created use case and case studies, and sort of those were part of our portfolio when we were, speaking with and messaging customers. But, resonating with customers through your purpose is creating a deeper emotional connection. I'm just going to say it because it's true. And the loyalty that can translate into repeat business and also positive word of mouth, right? Them talking to other people and other companies they know. and also resilience through tough times. I mean, through COVID, we didn't lose one customer, right? Even though a lot of them were like, we can't give you the kind of business we were, but we love you guys and we're going to stick with you. But it takes work to ensure that you are indeed letting them know, like Heather said, what you are doing. So some of the ways that I did this was ensuring that our purpose was effectively embedded into our customer onboarding process and talking points, that our monthly, customer communication messaging contained all our overall purpose and mission and our passion projects. We included quarterly impact reports on our purpose projects to our clients. This also helped our clients then connect their company to contributing to the success of those projects, right? Well, we're paying you to do a service, and you're utilizing that revenue to do these amazing things in the community. So today it's important for companies, every company to show their commitment to a bigger purpose and sustainable business practices. And if they can do that by tying themselves to you, it's a lot easier for them.
Mm-hmm.
And on the storytelling, 100% brand differentiation, right? We all know that storytelling is also a marketing strategy, but it imparts a certain authenticity because it's sharing your unique narrative and your passion for what you are doing. So, Heather looked at it from one perspective. I'm looking at it from sharing your story as a company. So in competitive markets, the clear purpose that you have is a differentiator from your competitors. It also helps in building like a unique identity value proposition, and it stands out to consumers and partners and also your very own team, right? I took my leadership team out. I take them out on a couple of retreats a year. And on one of those retreats, we spent 2 days going over our story, our company's story, and creating our hero's journey. And if you don't know what hero's journey is, you can look it up, but it's got 4 different, parts to it. And it's normally done for individuals, but we walked through the process and the company's transformation that we had and did it as a team. And we had adapted the individual lens to a company lens. And it was a great exercise to get perspective. And also it helped us build and cultivate the story that we would all share and tell the world and our customers and our teams.
Wow. So in that leadership retreat, you take the individual lens and tie it to the company lens around purpose and value?
Right. So taking how has your company transformed? What's your company's journey, hero's journey to get to where it got to? And then that is a story that your team can tell that is real. And that is a story that your clients can connect to and go, wow, this isn't just a company that's out there doing this. And, they just thought of it. This was a whole transformation that happened. And this business is absolutely doing things that are different and that are good. Because, there's a lot of purpose washing out there. There are companies that are just saying, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that. And but if you can show them the real transformation that your company and share that story, that's where you really get that real connection, to being an authentic, purpose-driven organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just to add to that, Desiree, I think that's just amazing what you're doing. Those are great examples, but it's also about impact, right? So we talk about, showing your purpose, demonstrating your purpose, but how can you measure your impact, right? And again, communicate that so that people know that, wow, they really are doing more than they said. So, I mean, that's the other thing is going above and beyond and demonstrating that. Yeah.
I have to tell you, I almost have goosebumps because as you both talk, I'm just thinking about this is meaningful, impactful work in the world. It's not about that P&L. I mean, we all have to manage a P&L, but it's beyond that. And it's seeing the humanity. Desiree, you talked about COVID. And one of the things that I've observed during COVID from a leadership perspective is that we've started to see each other as human beings having a human experience, right? We got to see people's kids run in on Zoom calls, and we got to know that, hey, I understand your child is in or your parent is in palliative care, or you have a special needs child. I think hopefully we're starting to see the universe really morph and change into one of greater humanity and less anonymity behind desks. And so that's what I'm feeling from both of you. And I just am honored by your commitment to really the world and your sphere of influence. The last question that I'm going to pose, and then we're going to open it up to some questions, is, and this is a big one. What are some common obstacles that you face trying to scale while staying true to purpose? Heather, do you want to start us off here?
Well, I can tell you that as a person who's co-founded 2 nonprofits, one of the largest obstacles to scale is not getting the right level of investment needed to achieve that vision. So it's one thing to have a P&L where you're making profit and you can actually take that profit and inject it back into the organization. But when you are a nonprofit, typically, like we literally have a sustainable model and that's it, right? And so what you need to do is find people that are interested in and have a passion for your platform, and find a way to get that engagement without pricing yourself out of the market. But sometimes you need a stakeholder to believe in the purpose and is willing to take a risk on seeing it happen. So, nonprofits again are different, but if you are struggling with scaling, sometimes bring in an equity investor, and that can be not always the greatest thing, but it allows you to kind of hit that next point of inflection, as it were, so that it'll give you that boost for scalability. But it also requires passion, innovation, teamwork, and persistence. So you can't just kind of do this with, oh, well, that didn't work, so I guess we're not going to do our scaling. We'll just stay in this mode. So there's always going to be naysayers. There are always going to be people that believe they can do it better. So I think the most important thing is to listen, observe, pursue innovative ideas, and never sacrifice your values or your standards of excellence. It's easier said than done, but being very transparent about what is possible and keeping people engaged is kind of in the process is absolutely imperative. So all of those things, when you're scaling it's tough, but you've got to be persistent and innovative. Those are the words that I would use.
I love it. Desiree?
Yeah, no, all excellent points. I would say shareholders or equity partners need to buy in. Like that can be a huge obstacle to move you forward. But as you add people, to the team or stretch people, because sometimes you can't just add people, during a scale, you're dealing with, lots of constraints. It's easy to, let the whole purpose thing drop. It really is, because now your focus is we need to survive, right? So scaling a company is challenging all on its own. I would take and look at purpose as one of the benefits actually during scaling. So I take it and flip it as a benefit. It's something that you and your team can hold on to. It will give them the push that they need to get through those difficult times and endure, because they have this long-term vision and purpose that they're gunning for. That's one of the reasons you want to ensure that purpose is front and center all the time, especially through a scale, because when times get tough, it's key to keep that team gelled and supported. Scaling can force short-term thinking, and that's why the best time to put these efforts around purpose and sustainable futures is when you are starting out. And I know a lot of the people probably listening on this webinar are in that position right now of looking at a startup. So the best time is to do it at startup and have it ingrained into your business model, because then after your company starts to grow, it's a little easier to keep that set as you're going through those tough scaling periods. Purpose-driven companies also tend to always focus on that long-term sustainability rather than short-term gains. So if you can keep that vision at the front of things during scale, that perspective will foster more innovation, right? Just like, anytime you have constraints, you're going to foster more innovation, adaptability, and resilience, which is what you're going to need. These are all crucial factors for scaling and sustained growth.
Yeah, those are great examples, Desiree. And you mentioned culture. And I think one of the things that I observe in organizations that are scaling is what I call culture drift. So you've got to, fish have water, people have culture, it's in and around you. And as you bring new people in and they have different perspectives, and that's why I love what you're doing around recruitment, right, Desiree? We can get away from our own culture. And so for those that are watching and listening, and if you are a leader in an organization that scale up, I think one of my strong recommends would be you need to keep an eye on your culture. And it's one of those things like, how do you do that? I'm curious if you have any opinions on how do you kind of keep an eye on culture as you're scaling.
Heather? Well,
like honestly, it's just being engaged with your team. I mean, you have to have always an ear to what's going on. And when you see disruption happening, there's a reason why it's happening, and you have to kind of get to the bottom of it and make a correction, because the more you take your eye off culture, I mean, like we all say, strategy or culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's very true. If you can't keep on top of the things that are happening that are underscoring everything that you're doing, then you're setting yourself up for potential failure. I mean, honestly, culture is so important.
And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier around psychological safety is if you've nurtured an environment whereby people can speak up and they notice some culture drift, then they can say, hey, something's going on here that we need to address.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I always talk about is having that, that guiding coalition of influencers in your organization, right? So there's those, 3 or 4 people in the organization that everybody feels comfortable talking to. Right. They always go, chat them up at the water cooler and they know what's going on. So they share. Utilize those people in a good way, utilize them to share information, to keep the culture up, to keep the motivation and the positive attitude up, because they're the ones that have the best impact and the most influence over the rest of your team. If you're feeling uncomfortable about something, and even if you have an open culture, there are things that your team, let's face it, your team, if you're the CEO or you're running or a leader in the business, they're not always going to come to you. They may not feel 100% comfortable no matter how much they like the company, but they may talk to this peer who, will support them and at a peer level chat. So if you can get those influencers to help you, just like we have influencers in social media and everywhere else, that's helpful to keep everything positive and stop culture from drifting, as you say, Carolyn, during those hard times.
Yeah, and I think you raised a good point too, Desiree, around culture. Is oftentimes people think that the leader owns culture, and that might be true, but it's a shared responsibility, right? And having everybody on the same page. I'm just being cognizant of time. I want to open it up for questions. If there are any questions for Heather and Desiree with the breadth and depth of experience they have on purpose-driven scaling and vision and connection to growth. So I encourage you in the chat to go ahead and ask away. I think we've covered a lot of different topics, but while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I thought maybe it'd be appropriate with our last little bit of time to kind of take a step back and based on our conversation, have we seen any underlying themes that we could provide as gifts to those that are watching and listening to the Scale Up webinar this morning? And maybe I'll get you, Heather, to start us off on the themes that you've perhaps seen here today over the last hour or so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, alignment of everyone that's working on your on your objectives, on your purpose is extremely important. Engaging your stakeholders, engaging your team, communicating with team members and your clients, and being persistent when things aren't necessarily going exactly how you had planned, and being a little bit agile is also really important. But really believing in yourself and believing in your team and demonstrating that impact is really going to be key to achieving success. So, so many things, but ultimately, just great leadership and being, like Desiree said, being patient and supporting the team and not doing the blame or shame thing, but really looking at how you can be agile as necessary.
Yeah, beautiful advice. Thank you. Desiree, themes that you perhaps have noticed during our conversation today?
Yeah, great summary, Heather. I think, why is this important, right? Why do we want to incorporate purpose into our business? And I think if for nothing else, customers, are, wanting to work with organizations that are doing business for good, right? So if you don't show some kind of social purpose or conscious capitalism, you're not going to attract talent and you're not going to attract customers. It's just becoming far too important in the world that we live in today. One thing I will say is that nothing will come to you easily, and there will always be something challenging you, whether it's in your business life or your personal life. So I'm a little bit of a disruptor, so I always like to put it out there that you have to be bold, right? And in the words of the author of Goals, are you earnest? Seize every minute. What you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And that is so true.
I love that.
Yeah. So, great leadership is not about what people feel about you as a leader, but how they feel about themselves under your leadership. So that's, how purpose, what it does for me and for my organization.
Wow.
Yeah, being bold, I think, is huge, and it's even with a nonprofit, taking risk, and understanding the risk, but being bold enough to say we can do this, and here's why we can do it, and here's how do we do this together. So bold, I agree, 100%. And then my other term that I love to use is Gashida, and that's my mantra: get shit done. Like literally.
Gashida.
Gashida.
Yeah, I love it. Gashida, I love bold. I think for me, it comes down to what both of you said around communicate. Let this not be an event. Let this be an ongoing process. I think what we talked about is bring the humanness to our organizations, connect emotionally through story around our purpose, and then stay close to culture and prevent that culture drift. The fourth thing I would say is around comfort zone. I think if you feel as a leader while you're scaling pretty uncomfortable, that probably means you're learning something, which means that's good. So those little butterflies that you might be experiencing equals a good thing. I think that's, to your point, both of your points around risk. So before I send it over to Pete, I will just say that you both are bold. There's genius, power, and magic in both of you. And I love the fact that you get shit done. So it's been my honor. It's been my absolute honor to
Wow.
get to know both of you. I hope that it's one of many discussions. And so I extend my heartfelt gratitude and thanks for your contributions today of Scale Up Week. So with that, I'll send it over to Pete.
Thank you, Carolyn. Really appreciate you
Thank you.
moderating us.
Thank you.
Thank you to all three of you. Before we go, and we have 5 minutes left, I'm always open to questions from the floor. That's part of my job, is to pay attention to things that come in through either the chat or through questions directly. Part of my job is also to create a summary document, of course, at the end of the day, and to think through what I'm learning from listening to you. I happen to sit on the board of a not-for-profit whose focus is on the role of the citizen around health advocacy. and understanding what it is as citizens to understand our responsibility and knowing how the healthcare system works, but also advocating for ourselves, our families, and thinking about the role of citizens as the healthcare system evolves and changes. And of course, that's about agency. Part of what I'm hearing you talk about in this conversation about purpose, and the purpose as part of the ongoing culture as the organization grows, is giving agency to new people as they come on, having the right hiring practices, as Desiree was speaking to, making sure that everyone's exercising on a regular basis what it means to be and not to be part of a particular decision-making process, which is what makes up culture. But I really love the comments you were making around safe spaces not being free of conflict, meaning absent of, but actually understanding what your conflict management style is and how that becomes like family. It's like you want to believe that as part of a tight family and any growing company that goes from start to scale and beyond, you want to think of in a personal kind of way. Yet there's this whole world around us that, as much as we want to be purpose driven and recognize our clients that Desiree says we want to do business in a certain way, there's still a good part of the world that is transactional. There's still a good part of the world that looks at commodities and doesn't necessarily look at the humanity side of people. And the phrase that I've often heard in the past is, it's just business. It's not personal. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they're going to be out of business soon.
Right.
It's interesting.
No, here's the thing. The KPIs prove that having a purpose-driven organization helps your organization to be more productive, to be more profitable. So anybody who wants to do good business would start to look at how they could be more agile around the topic of purpose and culture. So it is good for business. It's not, something that's going to hurt them. It's going to help them to grow, and they will benefit from it. So the whole transactional part is where things are changing for a lot of businesses. I mean, you look at the number of B Corps growing in the last 10 years, right? In the first 7 years of B Corps, they were growing slowly. And then in the last year, they did as many as they did in the last 7 years. So all of a sudden, there's this reality and panic around UN SDGs, ESGs, purpose, helping, doing things beyond just what's about profit in your organization. So I would say those companies that just want to remain transactional while the rest of the world moves forward with more relational type companies, that there will be fewer and fewer companies who want to do business with organizations like that.
I totally agree with that.
You're on mute, Pete.
It's got to happen at least once in a webinar when someone says you're on mute. For feeling that comment. This conversation could continue because we could talk about other business models beyond for-profits and not-for-profits. Some not-for-profits are grant-driven. Some, of course, have a revenue model themselves, which is speaking even more so to Heather's comments about value proposition and storytelling. The parallel track to your panel was Jason Thompson talking about storytelling and the importance and the methods, mechanisms that are leveraged in order to do that. So for those of
Oops. Oh, frozen again.
recording, this is all being recorded as assets for the
Having a connection challenge.
with our next panel, which is about the evolution of leadership, going from being entrepreneur to actually being CEO of a large company, where sometimes you aren't always there for every decision. And that's where this panel's point about purpose and values and decision-making cascading into that culture, and the CEO almost being Zen-like and stepping back and removing themselves from the equation while monitoring to make sure it's good governance at its best. So thanks again for everybody here on the panel. We're going to go to our break now, and we'll see everybody back here in 15 minutes.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you.